would like to thank RCBA, particularly Mike Donaldson, who's here. He's here on behalf of the solo and small firm section of RCBA, who are our co-hosts tonight. Mike. Of course, RCLL, Riverside County Law Library, for sharing their space with us tonight. So much working overtime for us. Our event sponsors, Best and Krieger, Gresham Savage, and LexisNexis. Gresham Savage, Eugene Kim is here. Also, BBK Associates here as well. I also wanted to thank the panelists who are taking time out of their private lives to be here with us tonight. Thank you so much for contributing to the meeting. I also wanted to thank the APALIE board. This is a younger organization, and I think it takes a lot to start one of this nature. And with that, to that respect, I'd like to introduce to you Rosemary Koo, who's our president this year, who will say a couple of words about the organization.
It will be just a couple of words. I just wanted to introduce to you what APALIE is. APALIE is our short acronym for Asian Pacific American Lawyers of the Inland Empire. And because it's so long, I never read it because of the best. The organization name is so long, we had to shorten it to APALIE, but it's easy to remember, APALIE. We are an affinity bar association. We are partnered up as an affiliate chapter of the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association. So we are here because we have members of the community who are Asian, as well as non-Asian attorneys who understand these minority groups have particular communities that they are in contact with and face particular issues. So we are an organization that has been formed just purely out of the need for such an organization. And I thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to our panel and all the wisdom they have to share with us. And I encourage you to keep an eye out for some of our other upcoming MCLEs. We're going to be planning some specialty MCLE credits that we might all need to have before we report back to the bar for compliance. So keep your eyes open for some APALIE events coming up. If you'd like to join our mailing list, if you'd like to join as a member, our membership is only $25 for the year. So if you'd like to go on apalie.org, you can sign up and do all of the payments on there as well. Thank you.
So I wanted to give you an overview of the topics that we're going to touch on tonight, and then allow each of the panelists to kind of introduce themselves so you kind of get a taste for where they're coming from and kind of to orient you to some of the questions that we'll be discussing tonight. So we're going to be touching on 4 broad topics. Starting out logistics, what it means to actually go solo or start a small firm. Business development, which is critical for such an endeavor. The client-side management of running your own practice, and growth. How do you keep growing yourself and or your business? So those are the 4 topics. So before we start with the bios, just to give the panelists a sense of who their audience is tonight, let me see by a show of hands who are law students here tonight. And we've got 1. How about practitioners who are in their 1st through 5th year of practice? About 4, 5, 6 perhaps. 5 to 10 years of practice, anyone? And we've got those 2. How about more than 10 years of practice? Wow, wonderful. And how about more than 20 years of practice? Cool. Okay. So now that they've got a sense of who you are, let's get a sense of who they are. Go ahead.
Excuse me. Hello, my name is Sagel. I've been an attorney for about 10, 11 years, and I went off on my own about 2 years ago. Started off part-time because I had a child, and I'm pretty much full-time now. So my work focuses on adoption work. I do a little bit of juvenile dependency, a little bit of juvenile dependency. I also do criminal appellate work on the side, so to speak. I'm sure I'll get into the business for that during
I'm Greg Rizio. I graduated from law school in 1991, so it's been 26 years. Been in the LNFR since '92, so 25 years. I started my practice in 1995. I did both criminal and personal injury at the time, and then transferred only over to personal injury thereafter, and I've been focusing on that for quite a while. So it's not a responsibility.
Well, good evening. My name is Brian Pearcy. I too graduated from law school in 1991. I did not start law school straight out of college. I had other career experiences before going to law school, so I was probably an older student when I went to law school. And I already had a business of my own, so that probably also helped guide where I wanted to go in terms of my professional practice, in terms of advising business. My experience right out of law school was I went to a large firm for this area. They had offices here in Riverside, San Bernardino. I started off, I was hired as a litigation associate, and between the time that I'd been a summer associate, by the time I got there after the bar, I showed up and they said, oh, part of our transactional practice left and started their own firm, so now you're a transactional associate. So I have sort of anyone has any background that's sort of like you're either a transactional attorney or a litigation attorney. And I wanted to do litigation work, so I made a deal with the firm that I came to and said I wanted to do litigation work as well. So literally, I was the lowest on the letterhead, had 2 offices, 2 secretaries. In San Bernardino, I was a litigation associate at Riverside with a transaction associate and an office hours between the 2 places. So that kind of helped form my perspective going out.
Good evening, my name is Jennifer Gerard. I've been practicing 15 years, which is crazy to actually say. I started out as a DA. I was actually a DA in Orange County briefly, and then I came out here to Riverside. I practiced there for 3 years, and I went out on my own. Initially doing criminal defense for juveniles, some dependency, and I also did work for appellate attorneys in LA. And then I said I'd never be a family law practitioner, and now that is 95% of my practice. And I'm actually enjoying it, even though I said I would never do it, so never say never. But yeah, so that's kind of, I've been doing that solely family law for about 8 years.
Wonderful. So if you wanted more information about their background, if you look at your neatly compiled handout, all their bios are on the first and second pages, and has their contact information should you want to follow up with them. And your MCLE handout also has 3 articles on this general topic of small firms and starting out on their own. Okay, so let's get started. Starting out logistics. I think this is the #1 question when somebody is entertaining the idea of even going out on their own, which is, what is the biggest fear and how have you overcome that fear of starting in your own words?
I can start. I mean, I'm obviously the newest here, and so I still kind of deal with this fear every day. But my biggest fear was how am I going to replace the salary that I was making with my own income? Of course, my husband and I looked at our finances, and he's supporting the family. So in that way, that helps alleviate that issue. But to what I was saying earlier about doing criminal appeals, I had to find a way to ensure that I was supplementing to our family income while at the same time keeping my legal research and writing skills fresh while I kind of figured out how to, start the business side of opening my own practice. So one thing I did was, and my background is in criminal prosecution. I was a federal prosecutor for about 6 years. So having that experience and having done a number of federal criminal appeals, I knew that I could apply to be on the panel to do either state or federal criminal appeals. So right now I'm on the indigent defense panel for state criminal appeals. But that enabled me to continue earning income while I kind of started this field that I now know something about, but started out really nothing about, which is marriage and adoptions. So I think it's helpful to kind of think outside the box, use the skills you already know to somehow let that into dream of it while you were starting to practice?
I was kind of fortunate when I came out in that I broke off with a couple of guys from the firm, and one of the gentlemen in my firm was raised in Michigan, Japan, so was fluent Japanese. So we had an influx of civil litigation cases going on. Fortunately for me, he spoke Japanese, he knew nothing about civil, he was a criminal. So we had more than enough money to get it started. Crazy thing for us was we came out and we just grew this humongous practice. And it was a logistical nightmare. Was never really worried about how am I going to feed my family. I was worried about how am I going to service all of these clients. And when we broke off, our model was based on the model of the firm that we had broken off. So we had 3 attorneys, 8 offices, 7 of them satellites, where we would go meet the client in Beverly Hills at 5 o'clock at night on a Friday, and then have to leave our office at noon to get there and see them and retain them. And we were stood up, our whole day was wasted. So I've probably done everything wrong that you can do. So when you want to know what not to do, give me a call, and I'll tell you what not to do.
Which is very valuable. I mean, it is, right? I mean, we can all talk about what things we can do right, but it's really learning from what we can do better.
Yeah, like Greg, I started off in another firm. I knew probably by about year 3, I didn't want to stay in a large firm environment and do the partnership track. I kind of knew that wasn't for me. It's not that they didn't want me there. They were disappointed, but I didn't like being in such a large environment. It was too bureaucratic for my taste. But I had a couple of colleagues that we put together a firm of our own, and what we tried to do was vary our practices so that we could do things covering what I call the ups and downs of the marketplace. So we had one partner who was family law. So that was like a constant billing machine. We had one partner who was personal injury, so we figured we'd have some ups and downs. And then myself, I was business and real estate, and I was the management partner, the business side. So what we were trying to do is put together the 2 pistons of the hourly, and then covering it to make sure that we could then help it forward, and having a personal injury attorney that could take on cases that would take risk, that they gamble to pay off way down the road. So that was kind of the model that we chose from the beginning to help do that. Because going out and starting in personal injury, we've got big bank accounts to start off with.
So I came obviously a PA's office, which is obviously a government entity, and I did criminal. And I did a lot of trials in the time period I was there. But going into private practice, your options are somewhat limited if you're just going to do criminal, because it's going to become criminal defense is really your only option, or appellate work, which is obviously post-litigation, so to speak. So when I went out, I actually worked for a firm that contracted with the county of Riverside. So I had an umbilical cord to a steady income, but at the same time, I was able to leave and pay out my private practice as well. And I'd say the biggest mistake I made, and some of them may disagree or even agree, is because I was like only concerned about how I was going to match my income. I now had retirement to think about, insurance, overhead, things that I never had to worry about before. I wanted to make sure I could at least cover those bills, let alone put food on my table and feed myself. So it definitely was a scary scary at first to go out. But my biggest thing was I was all over Southern California initially. If I and I had a lot of referrals. I was lucky in that aspect, but I had Orange County friends who I worked at the DA's office and hey, look, I have a friend, but obviously I'm prosecuting them or my offices, so I can't. And they give me cases, and I ended up in LA, in San Bernardino, and often in the desert. And so I would not advise, I'd say that's something that I would not advise doing that. It'd be more wise if you're starting out or thinking to kind of try to hone an area. I find that an environment to be actually amazing in that respect because San Bernardino courts are often very close to Riverside courts. But it certainly isn't advisable, I would say, to drive all over Southern California, particularly in the freeways that we have. So.
sounds like when you're starting off, you're thinking about how you're going to supplement or keep up your own income stream to support your own practice, however that is compiled or, assorted. One big question is, what are your biggest overhead expenses, and how do you minimize those things so that you basically hedge against some of the risk when you're starting out?
Well, I'll start this one. Gosh, running your own practices, a lot of you probably know, I always think they don't compare you in law school to what you really do. You're an advertiser, you're an attorney, you're a business person, you're negotiating your own contracts, you're an office manager. You do so many things that it's hard to live life with your family. It's like, I don't have time, to be home. And it makes it tough. What we did when we started off a long time ago was we kind of did what a lot of you did. I made the mistake of sort of doing what Jennifer did, although I would say that while I agree with her, it's great if you can hone into one area, we, for fear and for trying to cast a big net and to make sure we could cover everything as well, because we were trying to build a PI practice, which, like Brian has said, is high risk, high reward, right? I can't tell you the amount of people who have left my firm to go out into PI and they can't make it, right? Because it's just so expensive to run a PI practice. So for me, my biggest overhead is funding my cases. I might go to trial. If it's a big case, I went to trial on a case and I had $150,000 of my own money into the case, right? Because I got to write expert checks and I got to write depot checks. And so
right,
that's...
Not to interrupt, how did you fund that? Was it a financing line, or what did you do?
We fund our own cases. We are fortunate to be able to fund our own cases at this point. We have had some very big results, and so we do not do it by financial line. A lot of firms do. The problem with that is that sometimes you take a case and you have a humongous amount of costs, and then you get, the case goes bad, right? And now the client wants money in their pocket. You're like, well, okay, what am I going to do? Well, okay, I'll waive some fee. I'm not waiving my costs, right? I mean, I have to try and get those back, at least recoup those. Fortunately for us, we get to pick some pretty good cases at this point, so we're lucky we're not really faced with that as much anymore. But that is always a dilemma for us. And our biggest overhead, I do have a couple of attorneys that work with me, all on contingency type of thing. So what they settle, they get, you need what you kill, is the old saying. And fortunately, I can pay them a draw and they can survive. But it's a tough market, high risk, high reward. I think anyone who's done it. But our cases are very expensive.
Got it. So if you're from a firm that doesn't do this type of contingency work, where you're kind of out of pocket until you actually reap the rewards, what are your typical overhead expenses, and what do you try to minimize or manage?
Well, what I would say is personnel. We started off, and we knew this going out. When we started our firm, we wanted to make sure we brought in what I would call high quality employees right from the beginning. And then even trying to attract them away from good firms or good places where they're working and they have security and they have. We worked real hard to make sure that they felt comfortable that the resources were there. And so literally what we do, and I'm not saying everybody can do that, but if you have the ability to plan, you sock some money away before you even leave. I mean, literally what we did, part of our operational plan was the partners, we took no salary or draw for 6 months. And what we did is that's how we gave assurance to the employees by saying, you will be fed for at least 6 months. And that was part of our way of helping make them feel comfortable to follow us out the door. And so we could really hit the ground running at the front. Not to say that everybody can do that, and I understand that, but just from that perspective, if you're trying to, and I say this when I teach bridging the gap, hire the best, most experienced employees you can get, especially in terms of staff. Because especially even if you're an experienced practitioner and you're working in a firm environment, are you the one who actually knows how to file a document with court? They're the ones that do all that. And they're the ones that can teach you how to do that. but part of that overhead we're talking about is not just personnel, it's sort of, you then learn how to do things yourself. There's bottle washer, cook, chef, running the business. So that's one way to kind of help keep the overhead down, is do as much as you can if you're slow at the very beginning. Do as much as you can. The more you learn about operating the business, the better you're going to be down the road to be able to figure out what's a fair price or what's your time worth to hire something out.
If I could ask a follow-up question, so that, we've hit personnel, huge expense, human capital. What about non-human capital? And what would be, to you, essentials? For instance, billing software, LexisNexis, office space, maybe that's been a negotiable. What are your thoughts on what your short list of essentials would be?
I would say, not pertaining to staffing, I would say billing software. I mean, I bill hours, that was something that was actually shocking to me, having to do that coming from a government entity. I'm not shocking any of my time. I've got to be an expert at it now, obviously, and it's your bread and butter. So I would say billing software is good. I would say having a good calendaring system too, maybe not as high cost as it would normally be these days, but I would say for sure those are things. Rent space is, I think, important. But I don't know, I would say it's up there at the top of it. You could always rent an office within a building and be fine, especially if there's a general secretary who could, feed into your office. But I would say those are probably two of the things I would highly recommend if you're starting out. You're going to need to contain it and you need to manage your money so you know you can play your staffing and not have to furlough income for yourself.
I agree with, again, I'm the most junior person here, and just to give you a bit, I don't have office space officially yet. I work out of my home, but I have office space that I can use whenever I need it, and that's where my mail goes to. And for me, I'm starting out the way that Brian kind of mentioned, where kind of learning everything myself, learning how to file documents, and because I not only went out on my own, but changed the line of work I do from criminal to adoption work, I felt that it was really important for me to kind of start from the very basic level of, just how do I do, all these kind of administrative tasks that I never really did before I hire someone, before I have that kind of expense. So for me, in billing software, for the cases that go to a bill, which some of the work is billed and some of it is hourly billed, others I charge a fixed rate. So it's important, and so is LexisNexis and Westlaw. But for me, the biggest expense, and I do think it's a little bit specific to my type of work, is any type of publicity or advertising that we do, because that's how not only I get clients, but I get those potential birth mothers who are actually listening to our adoption. And with with everything that's happening on the internet these days, which is great, it provides great opportunities for advertising, but those are not cheap. And so I've had to think of again, how to draw ways to get my name clear and try to get contacts that will help me attract kind of both sides of the picture there. And really talks about, I don't know if this is the right topic for this discussion, but talking about getting your name out there by going to relevant legal groups, and for me, there's, for example, an academy of for adoption attorneys, and so it's even more specific than a lot of focus in on the type of work I do, and start figuring out what do they do, who in this industry do I think does it right, and how can I work the best way with them, like they do.
That leads into our next topic, but that's great. Let me just ask two questions to wrap up this topic, just by a show of hands. In terms of business cards, stationery, looking kind of legitimate, are those non-negotiables? Pretty good.
On the website as well.
Yeah, there you go. Malpractice insurance. Some attorneys don't carry that, depending on where they're at in their business model. Non-negotiable?
I think you have to have.
Yeah.
It's the first thing I did.
I don't think you ever waive
unlike any other type of insurance. I mean, you think about it, you go as a new driver, your insurance is the most expensive and it goes down as you get more experience. But the reverse irony is, in the law practice, the less experience you have, the cheaper the insurance rates are. The more experience you have, the more it goes up. So take advantage of it as you're younger in your career.
Great point. I don't think that's a known fact. Okay, so let's go into the business development side, which we kind of started. That's our second topic for tonight. You kind of started on how you basically cater and tailor your outside activities to basically the specialty area that you are trying to develop. Any other thoughts on how you all brand, market, build a book of business?
Well, I'll use this from back as the model that we kind of followed when we started the firm back in '96. Again, we had 3 different practice areas we focused on. We wanted to establish kind of sort of a brand name, so we literally did with our initials and sort of a logo theme and so forth. And part of that was so that any type of, whether it was a letter that went out, whether it was a business card or something, we were kind of working on, if you will, establishing the branding element. I don't know if it's necessarily super important, because back in that time period, everybody used the yellow pages. People use the yellow pages nowadays. Really, it's all about the internet and SEO, search engine optimization, and so forth. But there is certain elements, especially if you're getting involved in the community or doing other things, where you want to be able to have your brand kind of be recognized. Think about some of that as a way of, you know what an Apple logo looks like, or an icon, or something like that. Think of something like that that you can use to help brand yourself, so that way if you're doing other marketing material, it's not the law offices of, and it's this huge name, which is kind of these laws. Just a thought.
I could keep you here all night on this, frankly.
Give us one first.
Well, my industry is highly competitive and highly cutthroat when it comes to marketing. But the problem with my industry, the PI industry, is you have kind of the old guard who are used to being the trial dogs, right? And they're used to the yellow page guys or the internet guys sending them the cases. So they never gripe about when someone's on the radio and I'm the best lawyer ever, and then when I take a case over from them, they've committed malpractice like 50 times over and I gotta save them, right? They never gripe about that because that's that guy advertising and I might get the case when it goes to trial. I came from a firm that taught me yellow pages, right? So I actually came up in a marketing background, but I tried my own cases, so I never sent it out, right? So the old guard is all mad at me because I advertise that I'll try your case, and they feel like I'm challenging them, because now all of a sudden these other people are finding me and asking me to try their case, right? And I'm in a group called ABOTA, which I would highly encourage all of you to try and be a part of. That means you've tried a certain amount of trials and you are seen as a professional and well-respected lawyer.
What does that stand for?
ABOTA stands for American Board of Trial Advocates. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but if any of you want to look into that, I was president last year. I would strongly encourage you to get 10 trials, jury trials into it. It's very good for your reputation, your career. But the ABOTA guys, they don't want me to advertise, and they frown upon advertising. And yet I sit there and I listen to all these people who send me cases, and they have no idea what they're doing. But they came out of law school, and they know how to SEO or CIO or FFO or whatever the others are, right? And they can do that, and they're getting great cases. And they brag about how they settled, this case for $250,000, and I look at the case when it's over, and I think I should have settled for $2 million, right? So it's kind of for me, marketing is very difficult, right? Because I kind of piss off the old guard because I'm aggressive. I don't know if you feel it, I shouldn't say piss off, I'm saying again, I'm aggressive in what I do, right? And at the same time, it's like, I think it's a benefit to the client that the guys who know what they're doing are getting those cases and starting it from the front, because the PI guys, really your job is to get the case as early as possible and teach your clients, go get the treatment you need, document what your pains are. don't avoid going to the doctor because number one, it's going to help you get better. And number two, the other side can't say, well, you never went to the doctor, so this can't be true, right? So it's marketing to me is a very frustrating thing in the law. It just is. And I'll get on my soapbox. But it's expensive. It's probably my second highest expense. We have a massive website, a massive presence. It's majorly expensive, and it also makes people mad. So.
Okay, just to back up, I mean, my strategy to start my practice also had to do with finding what I wanted to do. When I was leaving, as Jennifer mentioned, when you leave government, and specifically in prosecution, your options are somewhat limited. You could go to a firm and do some type of litigation. I had that background before I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Or you could do criminal defense work, and I was really not very interested in either. So when I found adoption, which was, by happenstance, I had a friend who worked for an adoption agency. I just started organically looking over what does an adoption attorney even do, and is this a real thing? Can I actually make a career of it? And I found, I just started contacting adoption attorneys and asking to meet with them, and I learned that a lot of them are sole practitioners, most of them, and some were very welcoming to newbie in the industry. They were very much like a gold card type of situation where it's a kind of discrete number of them in this area, and a new person entering, many were very welcoming. The others told me that it's a dying field, and I'm just going to use my money. So I ended up being lucky enough to have some that started introducing me to the judges in the area who were taking adoption cases, and then through that and through this other organization that I joined, basically California Adoption Attorneys who have done a certain number of adoptions. Those individuals had a conference up here. I went to that conference, met one of the other judges, and then she eventually put me on her list of attorneys that she calls when there are contested adoptions that come up, and there's a party, usually the father of a minor, who has rights to an attorney in these situations, but doesn't necessarily have the money to pay for it. So I got put on that panel to handle contested adoptions, and that helped, number one, we learn about the field and figure out how adoption works, and number two, started to get my name out there. And we're staying with business cards and coming up with a logo that was the name of the business, which a lot of law firms use the name of the attorney, but I also have a name that's called Supportive Adoption, which I thought about a lot. I Google a lot of other adoption attorneys to see what they did. So, that's how I started, and I think doing that background research is helping me get clients now, which the adoption agency, one of the adoption agencies that I introduced myself to ended up filing for bankruptcy, and lo and behold, I was one of the few California adoption attorneys that they referred their clients to. So, if you're just kind of persistent in making all these various connections in the industry, making yourself known and getting your feet wet, it's helped me to develop a business on one client at a time together.
I would just add, I think obviously being a part of legal organizations is important, obviously RCBA, APALIE, different ones, but I'd also probably focus on areas of law you don't practice, because those areas don't practice your area. And so I think it's a good, marketing tool. Get involved in city organizations. I work a lot with mock trial and high schools in the area. I do a lot of go to high schools on individual one-on-one with teams who are looking to get into, something law-oriented, whether it be an attorney or paralegal or probation. And I work a lot with North High School and King and those students. And you get your name out there that way. And I could probably count on one hand. I got just 5 cases from a student of mine whose mother worked in the industry and just had people come up a lot. And she'd say, I don't know if you do this area law, but call this person. Or she'd tell me, I called this person. I told them we'll get a client out of it. And obviously that wasn't anything, no law association. It was really just me volunteering my time. And they really do say you get more if you give. And it's really truthful because these kids will belong onto you. And then it's the same thing if you become part of some local agency in your city or town or the county you're practicing in. I don't necessarily Riverside. I do other stuff in other areas of the county, but I think that's a good, important way. Branding is a huge thing these days. It really is, that everyone's branding. So I almost think the old school measures are also good because you kind of have to, you know, be persistent and work at getting clients out. I think you can have your advertising out there, but if you keep you on local, probably be, I think, ideal.
If I can add one last thing to that, because I agree with what all of them said. Remember when I started and I said, come to me when you know what to do because it was wrong? I was a yellow page guy, right? Then I became an internet guy. And I didn't need anybody in the legal community, right? I mean, I had more than enough cases coming in from those sources. But all it turned out to be was the wrong order, right? And really, seriously, I mean, I'd walk into court and I didn't really know anybody. I mean, I'd see Brian's face and I'd kind of know who he was, but not know him. Get involved in the community. I would tell you that is the #1 source of getting your business. It's the #1 source of feeling part of the community. I've gone totally to the opposite extreme. Like 7 years ago, now I'm involved in everything. My wife's like, are you ever home, right? Because I feel like I lost out so much over those years for not doing that. I think it's the biggest mistake I've made in my career, frankly. And I would tell you that, you know, even a lot of people, I've been in this community since '92. And some people still sort of see me as an outsider because they've known I've been here so long. And yet they didn't know me till 7 years ago. And, you know, again, back to that marketing being like, well, we don't trust this guy. We knew who he was in the yellow pages, but we didn't really know him. And then they get to know me and they go, wow, you're just a really nice guy, right? Get involved. I mean, seriously, that's the most important part that I can tell you tonight. Get involved. Don't be lonely. Meet people in your community.
Can I add to that?
Of course.
So, same way, when I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, I thought this is great. You know, I can work with my dogs around me, and no one's gonna care if I'm wearing a suit or not. And then I realized that this is really long. It's like just me in front of my computer a lot. We're on the phone quite a bit, but it's just not the same as being able to walk down the hall and talk to someone for a minute. And so I do think getting involved in organizations or planning a lunch, and it can be strategic. You know, you can have a lunch with someone and talk about business, but also it's just getting out and talking with another human being for a little while face to face. So I learned that very quickly. And actually, I miss having that a little bit of an office environment. So.
I'd say that's probably one of the biggest dangers of going out on your own is sort of that social isolation. And that's very easy. It's very easy to focus on that computer, focus on what's in front of you, and you sort of lose that perspective of the bigger world. And so even if you're not even thinking of it as a marketing perspective, get out. Get out of the office, get out from behind the desk, get out and do something. Because that will ultimately allow for a healthier you, mentally and emotionally. And then you'll find that as you start meeting people and getting involved, it just kind of builds on itself. And it doesn't even have to be specific, it doesn't have to be directed, because you know what? He's a great guy. And I go, Jennifer, she's a great gal. And what happens is people get to know you. They don't know how well you do in court. They don't know how good you are in dealing with an adversary. But they like Greg, like Jennifer, and they see your face and they trust you, and then they will call you to say, can you help me? And then your best thing is, you know, I'm sorry, I don't do bankruptcy, but I know somebody who does. But if any of you know somebody that needs help, call me first, and I'll get you to the right person. That's an invaluable marketing tool, because then you've got people coming to you, and then you're building up cross-referral opportunities to the other attorneys. Hey, my friend over here, she does adoptions. When we get to go there, and all of a sudden Amy's going to remember that. And that's where then it starts, if you will, there's sort of this critical mass, and you'll start getting cross-referrals coming.
I think one thing I can add to further this discussion along is this general comment, which is that when we think about ourselves as business makers or self-employed attorneys, we tend to be a bit mechanical about it. But at the end of the day, on the client side, they're trying to connect with us as attorneys, as human beings, right? They're trying to find a relationship there where they can feel at ease, because the legal stuff is not their world. And so they're trying to find the trust factor there. And so relating to people on a general basis rather than just a much more narrow basis helps develop all these different relationships. And the sources that you get of business, I mean, it can be direct, completely unexpected, completely indirect. So moving into this friendship zone of your friends who are naturally part of your network already, and they oh, I'm friends with Ami, or Greg, or Brian, or Jennifer. I've got a legal question. How do you deal with that? Because those people are also a basis of support for new business development. But those are obviously much more intertwined, but those are similarly to what you would expect of building client relationships and referral services. Any thoughts on how to handle friends who come to you who are already part of your network?
Well, either of you guys have that, could you tell me? I would say honestly, that is something I struggle with all the time. I have friends in all different areas. I'm actually the only on my side of my family that does law. Everyone's primarily medical. And so I get lots of questions, primarily medical malpractice or can I, more PI, that type of stuff, and I don't do. But I think my biggest problem with that is not, hey, do you know a lawyer? It's, hey, I have this issue, can you help me out? And turning down, I think all lawyers, especially ones who have been practicing for a long time, struggle with that. It is something I actually, because innately, I came into law to help people. And it, obviously we all want to make money, but I want to help people, so I want to be able to tell them, hey. And we talked as a panel a little bit about the horror stories of volunteering to help somebody, and then the next thing you know, you're in the middle of a malpractice lawsuit. And thank God I haven't been in that situation, but every time someone asks me for help, I definitely crosses my mind, I get that pit in my stomach, and I say, hey, look, call Brian Pearcy, he'll help you. Or call Greg, they know what they're doing in that area. And that I think it's a struggle I have. I list up there as one of the top priority ones that I really have problems with. I struggle with that even being out for 15 years now.
Greg, did you have a story that you wanted to share on this?
This is one of those, the grass is never greener on the other side, right? If a friend calls you up and asks you for your advice. I've been on both sides of this. It's like, oh man, anyone but me, please don't call me. Because now they're going to call you every night. I've been on the phone with friends like 2 hours a night every night, to help them through a tough result or a tough thing. Because I'm kind of a people pleaser. I try to help, and my wife's looking at me like, what the heck? This is, and I don't really know family law, but blah blah blah. I love Jennifer, but this is kind of my limited understanding. But call her tomorrow. And, so all of a sudden, especially when it's a friend, someone in your network, and they're calling you at home all the time, and they're doing all this, and you're trying to help them, and there's never a thank you, right? But then there's the other end of the spectrum, right? Someone gets in a massive accident, and they don't call, and you're like, what's wrong with me? I thought we were friends, right? So it's like, the grass is never, it's always greener on the other side. Personally, I kind of like, and I have other lawyers in my firm, so I tell people when they call me on a PI matter on that one, you know what? My firm is going to help you. If it goes to trial, I will ultimately try the case, but I am too close to you right now to be involved. So you need to talk to someone in the PI. If it's a family, I will give them and I will start off with the typical lawyer TV ad. This is not my area of law. I really don't know what I'm talking about. But the law seems to make sense this way to me, right? And call Jennifer tomorrow. Right? So let me get you through, because there's a human element that's hard, right? I mean, we all have friends and your clients, and they all want to understand, and they're all scared, frankly, right? I mean, everyone who's calling you, no one calls me and says, Greg, I just think you're a really nice guy. They're scared, and you want to help them not be scared. And the problem is when you dwell too far out of your area and they rely on you, that's when you're going to have a problem. I helped a friend. I ended up in a lawsuit I didn't mean to end up in. I worked this case up for them. I spent hours for free on the phone with them, and then they filed for bankruptcy because that was the result. I told them we were going to get them because that was the best result they could get, and guess who was named in the bankruptcy? That was the end of that friendship, right? Because I'm not even allowed to talk to them anymore about business. And I'm like, seriously, you're going to bankrupt me? I mean, how many hours did I give you? So I would agree with what I think everyone's here saying is, when it's a friend, then kind of just help them through their fear, but don't really give them too much advice. Send them out to somebody else. And if it's in your area of law and they know it's in your area of law, you're probably screwed. So just say to them, look, I'm too close to you, let me kind of help you through your fear, and let me send you to Puerto Rico because I'm too close to you, right?
The one thing I can add to that is that I learned about this because I was in a reverse situation. I am like a hypochondriac that will call up a few doctors I have in my family that, okay, what do I do about my daughter? They have nothing to do with pediatric care, and yet I'm asking things like that. So what I learned from them is that really, people don't realize that their specialty, that people think you're a lawyer, you just generally know about the law. And everybody does this with doctors too. So that's why I try to explain to them, like, look, this isn't my area. And yes, I could tell you what I think is best, but here's why I think you need to have, a second ear that really knows what you're talking about. And then I do my best to find the best referral. Yeah, and that's where kind of things like this really does help. So it's my one piece of advice.
So we're kind of at the halfway mark of our 4 topics. So let's take a short 5-minute break for you to kind of stretch out. I know it's kind of dinner time. If you want to grab more food, please go ahead and do so. We'll come back with the next topic, hindsight management. And we'll pick up on some of the things they shared with us tonight. Thank you. Our next topic tonight is the client side management of things. I think this is a good next topic because we've talked about starting out, figuring out how to market brand, deal with incoming potential business, and now you've got business. So what are you going to do? First question is going to be centered around intake. How do you all do intake? And do you provide an initial consultation without charge? How do you decline representation, and for what reasons?
Jennifer already started that.
Good.
So I do not do the initial contact. My assistant does. Through the phone. I do mediation through family law, which is non-court divorce essentially, and I have a website for that did come through email contact, but she makes all the first initial contact. Once in a while, I'll get contacted in court by a client, and then I get on my card and say, talk to my assistant. I think it's the smartest thing I did. Growing up as a lawyer, I would say my initial contact, I was the contact person. I had no staffing. I was wearing all hats like we've all spoke about. And I will tell you, it's very nice having a buffer, not necessarily because I don't want to deal with the client, but I feel like my time is better spent with her setting up the initial, kind of getting the parameters of how it works, and then moving forward. And I do personally do not do a consult for, if I have to give lengthy advice, then I will, but for the most part I do a free consult, half-hour consult on all my cases.
But I also start with a free consult because again, I'm starting out, so it's, I'm trying to make myself competitive compared to the other people that they can go to in the industry. So not only do I start with no fee, but for certain couples, I'm starting with, you pay me once I find a birth mother for you. And that's really taking a risk because, then you may have no budget to start with. But I'm in a position to do that. And, it's really desirable for a couple looking it up to not have to pay anything up front until there's a potential opportunity for them. So this is my marketing ploy. I'm yet to see if it's going to work. I would love to see it. But I'm in a position where I can do this while I am still kind of navigating my way through this industry. Yeah, that's kind of.
Well, I'll make this observation, being in 26 years now. I started off sort of doing free consults, but you can spend a lot of time doing free consults. So what you really need to kind of think about is people value something more if they pay for it. Do kind of think about that. Because if it's free advice, they take it like free advice. But if you charge them for it, they're going to pay attention. It's also a way of being able to kind of have a client self-select whether or not they really need your services. So what I'll have my staff do is say, Mr. Pearcy is available on these days at this time to this time. He'll be able to meet with you. He has a consultation fee of X for an hour. If it's for less than an hour, he'll charge less than that. point being is, if you've got somebody that's going to start bulking and even just having a minimum consultation with you and paying for it, especially for those that are an hourly rate type of business, you want to know that as early as possible. Because if they're bulking and paying your rate, even just for something as minimal as a half an hour consult, probably not somebody you're going to want to spend a lot of time with. You've got other things to do that can be productive for you in terms of income. I have had occasion where my staff will set up an appointment, and I'll look at what it is, and I will then call and sort of almost do a pre-consult, because maybe it's not something I really need to meet with them, because I should refer them to somebody else, or I want to get an idea of what the issue is, because I don't want them to come in and pay me for something if I really can't help them. And I can say, hey, what you do need is to talk to this person over here. So I'll kind of do a little bit of a pre-screening before I meet them on the phone, if I get a sense that it really isn't an issue that falls within my wheelhouse.
I'm a contingency lawyer. I'm the definition of free. I just look at you and envy you. People pay to come see you. I have to beg them to come see me.
It's the other way around.
Yeah.
In your case, kind of deal.
You know, I have to tell you that I take most of my firms with client calls. Kind of back to what I said before, is I recognize people are afraid. And I try and treat, I literally try and live my life by the golden rule, right? If someone were to call and be scared and whatever, I want someone to talk them through. Right? I will also tell you that, like, I've had people, you'll see me on my phone all the time. This is a true story. I'm at a mediation in San Diego. I get a call from a guy like, I got this CRPS case on the line. It sounds like crap. Don't be a video. I shouldn't say crap. But I wanted to kind of talk to you about it because, you know, I said, okay, we talked. We settled that case for over $7 million. So it's one of those things where I take almost every call because I'm always afraid that someone doesn't quite understand the value for the case itself. That's part of it. The other part of it is, I was at an event last night for one of my mentors, Bill Shernoff, one of the most fabulous lawyers I know. And, he was talking about how just, people want to be respected. People are afraid in this industry, right? And I can't tell you the amount of times I get a phone call like, well, you're the 5th lawyer I've talked to. And they all say I have a case. And I say, well, they're all lying to me. And let me tell you why you really don't have a case. So you don't just keep calling people. Now, you're welcome to keep calling people, but no one's going to take your case, and here's why. After I listen to them. Because I think that under the golden rule, they have a right to understand and not be passed off to the next person. So, fortunately for me, it's not I'm worried about people complaining about their bill. Oh, they'll complain when I get my percentage at the end of the case. How much are you taking? But they're not complaining up front, and you really have to screen and help. And, being a lawyer is about being a profession. And we're the butt of almost every joke. So let's stop being that. Let's help people, and let's get them through their fears. And I agree with all of you that it's hard sometimes because my time is better spent somewhere else, and you guys bill by the hour, so it makes more sense for you to do that. I don't bill by the hour. So it's just a matter of finding the right case, finding the right client, and helping them.
I will make this observation though. Sometimes, as you say, for the betterment of the profession, take the time to explain, even if there is no value, because that ultimately helps all of us in terms of the profession not having that black eye of they're nothing but a bunch of greedy attorneys.
And I also think it goes a long way in building your own reputation of being an honest, trustworthy attorney that will shoot straight from the hip rather than trying to create something out of perhaps nothing or shouldn't be created at all, right?
I think the hope is at the end of the day they'll probably never remember my name, but hopefully they will. And, how weird is this to say? This is why it's bad to be attorney. Hopefully it will. Hopefully their neighbor gets in an accident when they think about me, right? I mean, how warped are we as a profession, right? But again, it's just a matter of I don't get to bill by the hour, so it's not costing me anything to be nice to people. to help them out.
So in terms of billing, once, let's say you have a successful client initial consult or not, but you decide to take their case, how do you address billing issues when they do come up? Is that the number one dispute that you see in a client-attorney relationship?
I'm sort of out of this with you guys do.
I would say it's the number one dispute I have. At least in my line of work, and there's several family law attorneys out here who can agree, and I've had cases with all of them. There's a discovery process, which is in a lot of areas, that can get expensive and costly. And I personally inform my clients every step of the way, look, we may garner some information here, we may not. It's going to cost you roughly X amount of dollars. This is what you need to anticipate. So when they do get my bill and they're like, what? What's discovery mean? You know, and I say, remember that. It's a little bit easier for them to swallow, I think. It's probably better. But, you know, like Ryan said, everyone, you know, we're looked at as, you know, sharks. You know, it's the joke, or the, you know, kind of a lot of jokes actually. And I think the best thing I can do is just give them information. They know they're paying for their services on an hourly. You know, Greg's a little different because they may not realize it till later, but he is going to take his percentage. But at least with my profession or my area of law, they're kind of anticipating it. It is tough getting them to pay, and it is. I mean, we talk about being lawyers, but we're also business people, and we have overhead. So I'm lucky to have an outstanding assistant who, which when Brian talked about in the beginning, really, you know, investing in that. That is key because she's amazing, and she tries to get coached by several of my colleagues on a pretty weekly basis. But I treat her very well, and there's a good reason for that because she's excellent, and she's very good about getting me my money, so to speak. And it takes a little bit of the pressure off me, so when they're in front of my face, you know, yelling at me about this bill, I'm like, well, you kind of had an idea. So, but it's hard. It's a hard area. You're having to do both sides and wear both hats.
In terms of prepping a client for what they're going to do and ultimately what they're going to see on a monthly bill, how do you document the communication, or do you? Is it just completely verbally over the phone, or do you follow up with a confirmation email so that you have some type of record for, hey, we talked about this?
Oh, I'm very, very much email oriented. Yes, I mean, I think that's important. I think you have to be honest. I don't, you know, this is our lives. We do this all the time. They have other jobs. They have other, you know, we all have families, but they're focused on you to help them, and they're not keeping track of what you told them. They just know we're doing something where I have to get all my bank records, or I have to, you know, go get all my taxes from my account. They're not realizing the cost of that. And so I think, you know, I remind them just to confirm, you know, we're going to do discovery, and this is A, B, and C, what's going to happen, and hopefully we get D and F back, you know, and that's, but I personally document everything.
Yeah, to that point, I think what I was going to say is most important is communicating as early as you can what, you know, what it should look like if you know. And what you don't know, let them know, you know, like with my cases and adoptions, the couple is electric with mother. That may include co-pays for insurance. So we don't know exactly what the amount is, but you know, you need to set aside money for this, and you don't know what it's going to be for. So I have to be very clear with my clients about how much they're paying, what they're paying for. Some of it's going to be, a lot of it's not going to be at all, but it's included in this list of potential expenses. So I think you have to perfect a retainer agreement. I think having a schedule of fees with some contingency kind of plans in there, like if this doesn't work, I might have to do this, and I'll charge you for that. And then, you know, just making sure that you think through all the potential outcomes and where this case will go. And, you know, I have in my agreement that, look, if there's more litigation that's required, it's not contemplated here. Here are my hourly rates, or the hourly rates that anyone can work with. Because, you know, they should need all that information up front in writing. I have them sign an initial significant parts of that agreement, and I sit down with them in person and go over with them. It was very hard for them to say later on, well, I didn't know that there's going to be a charge for, you know, counseling services for work. they know because it was in writing, we signed it. So I think having very well thought out retainer agreements and the fees is extremely helpful in resolving these issues.
Again, mine's different, right? They're gonna come in at the beginning, they don't think there's no money out of my pocket, I'm gonna pull my wallet out, I'll sign anything.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the case, we'll look at it like, well, what do you mean what do you mean you're taking your cost back? So I've come up with, I just treat people, again, the way I think I want to be treated. And so I sit down with them and I actually break down, okay, if your case settles for $1, looks pretty good for you, right? I'm taking 33 cents, and they take me a penny here to mail something, and at the end, and I got to negotiate your medical bills. Now, if I make $1 million on your case, that looks so good for you sometimes, right? All of a sudden, there's a huge percentage going away from that. It's the same percentages, but it looks a lot more when it's $1 million versus $1. But I go over that with them at the beginning. And so at the end of the case, but then I screw myself, I'll tell you that in a second. But at the beginning, I go over it with them, and I just explain it. So there's never a question at the end of the case. What I always say, and every attorney in my law office always says to me, please don't say that anymore, is look, at the end of the case, if you don't think it's fair, we're going to sit down, and I'm going to talk about cutting my fee. So guess what? Every time I settle a case, I have to talk about, well, you said you'd cut your fee. I said, no. I said, we'd sit down, and we'll go over it. And I'll pull out the boxes of the cases of what I've done in your case. I had a client today come and picked up a very large check. Hey, I want to talk about your fee. I pulled out 11 banker's boxes and put them on the table. Just piled them up. All right, we talk about my fee. I should be charging you more. By the way, let me show you the costs on your case. They were $150,000 on another case, and we didn't go to trial. You want me to charge more? Because I'm not going to charge you more, but I'm probably not going to cut it. Of course, I end up cutting my fee anyway, make them happy, but, again, back to kind of the original thing, prepping your clients, right? Again, I can't go over this enough. They're scared, right? Take the time to walk them through it early. The number one problem with PI lawyers is at the end of the case, they retain them, they let them be, and then they show up, and, we need to settle your case, sign here, right? You have no trust, you have no rapport, you've done nothing to make them think that you're a good person. They just see you're taking money from them, right? The moment I meet with a client, I spend 2 hours with them, and I go over, here's the jury instructions, and here's what we have to prove, and this is why it's hard, right? And then they know, going through the case. When I get to a mediation, it's like, yeah, you told me this was going to be hard. So, from my perspective, it's very different again, but you can walk yourself through it probably in anything if you have good communication skills and you're open and honest.
Brian, you want to add?
Yeah, management of client expectations right from the beginning is key. It's absolutely key. So, yeah, take that time to walk them through, especially if you're hourly, walking through your agreement. I'll walk them through page by page, paragraph, and how. So, if they have any questions. When we talked about the issue about maybe something's coming along during the course of representation and how do you document it, I document it in my bill. I mean, I have, because, unfortunately, you get to live life where you don't have to worry about this. I live life in 6-minute increments, which really sucks. It really does. But the fact of the matter is, it takes discipline, but the discipline will pay off because if you do a good job of documenting along the way, there won't be questions at the end because they've seen it all the way along. I mean, my billing thing is talk to client about X, Y, and Z. Discuss this option. It's right there in the billing. And that's kind of, I treat almost like my billing records as a memo to the file. And that way, I have a client who every month has a very good snapshot of what's been done, as opposed to, because I know somebody call the client. Client about what? So if you start documenting what you're doing, and I look at this because I sit as a fee arbitrator. I mean, I literally haven't had to go to fee arbitration on any of my client cases, but I sit as a fee arbitrator for others. And that's kind of one of the big issues when people go when they're dissatisfied with their attorney is managing expectations on the front end, communications during the course of the representation. And if you've got a bill that just says talk to client or telephone call, And then you're trying to say, well, this was all about X, Y, and Z, and now you've got two different sides of, is that really the case? And maybe somebody's memory is failing, and it might be the attorney's whose memory is failing, it's confusing with this other case. It doesn't look so good. Take a little bit of time to walk.
Right. I think a general comment I'd like to make is that the client that you're representing in our attorney heads, that's our client. We represent their best interests, but they're still approaching it in terms of an arm's length transaction. They're going to bill me, and I have no clue what they're doing. They want to feel like they're in the loop and have some semblance of control, because it is quite scary to kind of just be billed that you don't understand what the attorney's doing. So the informational upload, so to speak, is quite important. Vice versa, in terms of not just communicating to the client in terms of what your expectations are. How about when clients have expectations of your availability? How responsive are you? How do you handle that? Or do you make yourselves available 24/7?
My clients all have my cell phones, and I tell them, don't call me during office hours on my cell phone, I won't pick up. Don't leave me a voicemail, I'll never check it. Text me, and if I can respond, I will respond immediately. If I can't, I'm going to trust back to my wife, our son died, how do I get off the phone, right? It's like, sorry, it's going to be 2 hours. But, again, it's one of those things, like if it's my sister, I want someone to pick up for her, right? She lost her kid. How do I say, sorry, I'm busy, right? You'd be shocked how I have a lot of clients, you'd be shocked how few of them really call me at home. Now, if I were you guys in family law, there is zero chance, that I would do this, right? Business, zero chance. Because then they're calling you at home and then they're griping about your bill. But for me, it's like, no one really, again, it's like, just text me. And I can't tell you, like, the amount of times at the end of the case, I get the, you know what, you were there for me, and I just thank you so much. And to me, that's as good as the money, frankly. I mean, to me, that really is. Now, fortunately, I'm at the point where I don't need to really worry about the money as much anymore, right? But, because in the old days, the money was pretty good, and, that was okay, too. Now it's like, that's how much more important to me now in my career than the money, which is why I almost cut my fee, and all the attorneys in my office are mad at me. Because what's most important to me is that people feel like they were respected and I helped them through a really difficult time. Because my job is so different than your guys. So they all have my stuff. Well, unless it's like, my back hurts, and I don't have a lot of those cases, but if it's a tragedy, they get my cell phone with the initial consultation, and they text me, and I'll text them back. They call me.
So I have that's not what I do not do moment. And this is what I learned is when I initially started out, I did family law. I actually do minors counsel cases where the court actually appoints me for kids that are involved in heated custody battles. So initially, because of my kids are all tech savvy these days, I give them my cell phone. Until I started getting some inappropriate texts from my teenage boys that were my clients. But that was one thing. But I initially, when I started out, and I was wearing all hats and answering the phone calls and doing all the documents and filing, I would give clients my phone number. And why Greg exactly said it is I get a phone call at 11 o'clock at night that my father, my baby's daddy, will not let me take the kid tomorrow morning. What should I do? And then I wake up the next morning and I have 100 phone calls and my voicemail will be full. And I learned very quickly, I was at that I need to pay my bills stage. I was very new into this, and I was like, I got rent to pay, I've got, a car payment, and so I did that. From Greg's perspective, I do think it's a little different when you're in that type of meeting. They're not going to call Greg when, they're sitting at an exchange with a custody arrangement, and the police are both there trying to separate two people from killing each other, almost literally. So I think it's a different thing, but I don't know for Brian or me, but that's not, I would strongly suggest if you're in a highly contentious area of law, which all are to some degree, but when emotions are involved, do not do that, and particularly if you're doing criminal.
Yeah, no, my business model is probably not smart, but no one really wants to call me and talk to me.
I was going to say, even during the last topic, was the piece of advice that I received 1 year at a law school at a big firm that I still try to stay true to this day, and I think it's really served me well, not just in my practice of law, but life. The piece of advice was, when you get a call, try to return that call within the hour. And obviously, that's not always going to be possible. But even if you can just call back, or text back, or email back, and say, I got your message, and I'm going to do, I'm going to get back to you whenever you get back to it, or just respond in some way so that they know that they've been heard. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like, I feel like people are so thankful when you do that, because it's just not done, and everybody has a cell phone these days. Everybody has the ability to see their emails all the time, so everybody knows that that their messages are going through. And instantly, which is good and bad, obviously, but, just to say, I'm tied up right now, but I can call you back tomorrow, next week, whenever it is, just that piece of advice I'm telling you that can really serve you well. In my law practice, I actually am starting out with a Google Voice phone number. And it's good because it comes up on my cell phone, but I know when it's for my business because my own number comes up. So what I do when it's after hours, unless I'm free for whatever reason, I mean, if I don't want to take it, I just let it go to voicemail, I can always call back. And that's the beauty of voicemail, it's the beauty of, people check people emailing you these things. You don't have to pick up when you don't know what to expect, and it's just not the right time for you. But I just think giving them that courtesy of being available or letting them know that you're there is kind of towing that line in a really nice way. Ryan, you have something to say?
You raised a really good point, and that is largest, highest number of complaints against attorneys to the state bar is failure. And so I would say that is sort of one of the things that maybe not within the hour, but within the business day or within 24 hours, make it that point. And then what I also do is I keep a log of the calls and when it was returned. I have a whole separate log that I keep right next to my blotter on my desk. So every call that comes in or staff will email it to me, and then I keep it in chronological order. So I also keep date, time that they called, who called, what it was about, and then I have a thing in there, the date and time I returned the call. Point being is, if anybody ever says, I called you 3 times and you never called me back, it's like, no, you called me on this day, and this day, and this day. I called you back and left a message on this day. It's just real quick and easy. And that solves so many problems right on the front end. And like I said, I don't have that issue, but part of my practice in dealing and assisting other business owners and other people on how to risk management, reduce possibilities of problems. That's one of the ways as an attorney you can reduce that problem. Have that kind of information in hand, because if you keep a log like that, you're going to know who you have to call back. And you're going to know the next morning when you come back in, sitting right on your desk, who do I need to call back within what period of time. And then you solve that problem of potential complaint.
I think a lot about the client is the client wants to feel acknowledged and important, also naturally aware that they're not your only client, right? And so the acknowledgement part of it is quite important, probably more important than a substantive response right at that minute.
If you have an assistant, I tell all my clients, like, look, try not to call me home if you can, because I have a family too. I tell them that up front. And by the way, you better have a strong marriage, because when you get a call from Ann and Joan, and thanks for today, it was fantastic, you might better understand. But you help them through a difficult time, right? You got to have a saneable wife or husband if you're going to give out your cell phone. They better make sure. But I tell all my clients exactly, and thank you for bringing this up, the number one complaint about lawyers is you can't get them on the phone. Everyone complains about that. You have my cell phone, text me. If I'm not returning your call, probably means I'm in trial, right? Call my assistant and tell my assistant I want to talk to Greg. Because if you just call me in the middle of the day, chances are you're not going to find me, right? And my assistant is instructed, and she will be fired if she doesn't do this. She is instructed to look on my calendar and say, Greg's not available for 2 weeks. Tuesday, at 10:30 in the morning, he'll be available. And it's never really 2 weeks, it's usually Friday. But, hey, and I set him up for this up front. He'll be available 10:30 in the morning next Tuesday. He's in trial. Right? If he can't call you before then, you're on his calendar. The biggest complaint I get is that I always say to them, you're going to call me, right? Because I live in a DirecTV world where I'll be there sometime between 12 and 9 at night, right? And if my assistant doesn't know who I'm talking to before, and it is a spouse who's lost her husband and she's crying, hey, sorry, I gotta get off the phone, I know this is really bad for you, but I gotta take this next call because they're set for surgery and their back really hurts, isn't gonna go over so well, right? So I tell them, you call me, and if I'm on the phone with a grieving somebody, my staff's gonna tell you, he'll call you in half an hour, and I'll give them an estimate. Right? Or I will call them back that night after hours, guaranteed. So, just avoid the complaints, guys.
And in general, that's a backstopping type of concept, right? You can do it with Google Voicemail, an assistant, but the general principle is backstop yourself somehow to manage the flow of communication when you need it. Now, in terms of disputes, we've all focused on how a client wants to be respected. In a dispute, that's probably most important more than ever. When a client wants to be heard, when they're not happy with you. You also don't want to obviously compromise yourself or not get your fair shake. You've already talked about how, Greg shared with us how he approaches that type of dispute, perhaps when it's related to a fee, or arbitration, which Brian kind of brought up. What other approaches or what approaches do you think are most successful in dealing with conflict with a client? And I think the purpose here is not to end on bad terms, but on better terms than when you first approach conflict.
Trying to reach back and think about how the client felt and why they're unhappy. It's probably how you want to start off the discussion. Because oftentimes the complaint about fees isn't necessarily about the fees, it's about something else. And so try and work the way back to why are they unhappy and what is it that then led them. I mean, they may be surprised that, oh, this bill was X amount of dollars, but is it because you had to do X amount of work that you didn't tell them about on the front end and prepare them for? Or is it because opposing counsel took some action that you had to do certain other action in response to that you had to do and you didn't really then tell the client before you did it because you didn't have time to? And then that's really just back to the explanation. So it really comes down to call the client in. Don't do this over the phone. That's one thing. Don't do it over the phone. Have a face-to-face. If you have face-to-face, the tension and anger tends to dissipate because now you're actually interacting with them. You're not talking to a phone. And then when you're talking to them face-to-face, you can also relate and bounce off of their body language of what's bothering them. It's like what you do in mediation. It's what you do in dispute resolution. You're not doing this with your own client.
Right.
And so you can kind of model and you can also de-escalate tensions just by how you respond. Rather than getting on the phone and talking real fast, you kind of slow the conversation down. And that's, again, get to the core of what the problem is. And I think most people, once they feel they've been heard, like any other dispute, it kind of goes away.
Physically being in a room with someone and making your presence there, making a priority to be there speaks volumes. Because it acknowledges how important they are, right, and how important it is for them to be heard. And I think Brian is absolutely right. A lot of this, when you go into these dispute resolution type of situations, it's not necessary to argue your case. It's really to mediate their grievances concerning you. But I think it probably helps to think of yourself as a third-party mediator in some respects. If we don't have anything more to add, I'd like to get to the last topic in terms of growth. So we've all heard that being self-employed or running your own small practice is very time-consuming. Number one question is, how do you keep advancing yourself, right? Because you're self-employed, but also too, how do you maintain a work-life balance? What has worked for you personally? And obviously, it's an ongoing project. Nobody starts off or we're at the end point of perfection. Obviously, it's a work in progress at every single stage of our careers. So,
part of the reason I wanted to start my practice is to have a work-life balance and to kind of balance it with raising my daughter. And so I think for me, being flexible on my schedule is helpful. I now fashion it so that I have the 2 days a week. And those 2 days are dedicated to work. I need to return a call here and there I can, but I'm really not in my computer on those days. And, you know, and it's going to be different for everyone. It's going to be different for everyone. For me, that's important. But at the same time, I knew if I would have spent all 5 days with her and not have, you know, this side of my brain used, then I think I'd also go crazy. So for me, it just works out well that if I need to on the days where I don't have her, you know, if I need to start a little earlier or like my husband put her to bed while I can continue what I'm doing, I do that. So I have, you know, I never have a 9 to 5 schedule, but I probably get about 40 hours a week, 40 hours of work in a week because it just kind of balances with whatever else I'm doing.
My firm's a little differently because I've got other attorneys too. And you know, I would say that I think I'm a very good husband and father. But the problem is our job, specifically me, you guys, because you guys bill, maybe it's a little different. My job is definitely not a 9 to 5 job, right? I try to make all my kids' sporting events, but if I'm a trial judge isn't going to say, okay, Mr. Rizio, you can let these 12 people wait, right? The problem I would warn you about is keep your lives separate as best you can. Now, there's a guy who gives them their cell phone and texts them and goes out, you know what I mean? But if you can, keep them separate because, you know, my wife and I used to have a date night every week. We would just go on a date every week because it's like, it's hard enough, we just need to get together. Then those date nights became, hey, you know, I've got an event in Beverly Hills tomorrow night for Bill Chernoff. Why don't we go up there together, right? And all of a sudden our date night was at a dinner with a bunch of lawyers. We knew nobody, and she wasn't happy. And I don't blame her. That was on me, right? So I would tell you as best you can, you got to have a family life. I mean, I'm a workaholic, guys, and I don't recommend that. I came from a dad who was gone before I got up and came home after I was already in bed. So when I say I'm a good dad, that's in relation to probably my dad. But you got to have, I applaud you for that. I just think that's amazing. And I do my best to make everything my kids do. And I do my best to try and be around for my wife. But it's tough. It is tough. You gotta learn to separate them. When you learn how to do it, come find me and teach me.
I don't have one. I do other things. And if you saw in my bio, I'm also a police officer. And I do that now part-time. But the reality is it's a whole other profession. It's a whole other thing, but it takes my mind out of this. And I also kind of look at that as my social time. And so the point I'm saying is create another hobby, another avocation, something else you do to pull yourself out of this. Because, you know, they always say, you know, the law is a jealous mistress. It'll take all your time if you want to give it all your time. So the point being is develop other outside things to do, specifically to pull yourself out of this. Because otherwise, you could do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you feel like you're still behind. And that's a horrible feeling. But you have to kind of block that out and start pigeonholing other things to do. The only other observation I would make in terms of trying to get that work-life balance, be careful about it, is working at home. Because then you never get away. You can't turn it off. The home office is a real easy thing to go crawl into. I'm very fortunate my office is about 4 minutes from my house. I have a very short commute. And so if I have to run home and go grab something or run to the office and do something, I can do it. But the point is, if you do have that home office or you do operate out of the house, you're going to find yourself that work-life balance becomes more work with work because this whole thing is the jealous mistress. Just try and project in a way that you want to get yourself to a whole different physical location.
And actually, you have a year and a half old Amy.
I would say the same thing. I don't have a work office at home anymore. I did, and I have 2 young sons, and I think a lot of what I do is my goal was to make I coached their soccer up until recently. I coached their teams. A spouse that is amazing is key. educate, I mean, quite frankly, and my husband's amazing, and he cooks, and he cleans, and does laundry, and I used to tease him that he was the best wife ever, but then he started arguing gender roles with me, so I had to change that. But he's, he's highly educated, he doesn't do law, but he also was very understanding, and quite honestly, I involve him a lot in my practice. In other words, I bounce ideas off of him. I mean, obviously, there's the attorney-client privilege, and I don't breach that. But he definitely is involved, and so he knows when I do take a work call. I mean, I actually represent people, a lot of people who work 8 to 5, so they can't call during their day, so I will take after-hours phone calls, but I limit that, and I don't work on the weekends. It took me a long time to get to the work-life balance. It really did. But I started finding I was actually more successful at the time I was in my 8 to 5 work. When I got rid of the home office, I went pre-vendor because I did. I mean, it would be, my kids would go to bed, and my husband would fall asleep on the couch, and I would be like, you know what, I can write that quick letter real quick, or, let me review that, counter proposal, and I would do that, and I would find myself in there, it'd be 1 o'clock in the morning, and my husband's like, what are you doing? And I'm wide awake, and I found that when I stopped doing that, I was actually more successful during the day, and when I came home, I was a lot happier. But I would say, and I did work at home initially too, I did not have an office, and it just smells like Brian said, and it's tough to do, and I'm happy actually I've gotten there. It's still a daily struggle for sure. The struggle is real.
So with that note, let me open it up to any questions the audience may have. We have about 25 minutes left. We still have a bit of time for socializing afterwards. If you have any questions, I'm sure our panelists would love to hear from you.
And this is a little bit, I would say, yesterday for the first time I got someone I was unhappy with the service, and it really hurt my feelings. How do you kind of, when stuff okay, it's not personal, they don't understand what you understand. I won't, how do you kind of tell yourself? Everyone's like, I'll get over it, but you don't. I'm like, I kind of hurt. I'm like, hey, I did everything I could, and I still didn't get the result that you wanted. And I was just putting it out there.
Can't please all the people all the time is a good saying in this profession, buddy. It's got to happen. You know what? Again, people are coming to you because they're miserable. They're not coming to you because something's good in their life. Right? What I do is I just let them yell at me. I literally have learned, and it's very unnatural. The people on the stage will tell you right now, it's unnatural for me to shut up, right? I'm just a talker, right? So I've learned, and I do this with opposing counsel as well. If they're pissed, I just let them go off, and I shut up. And I very much what Brian said, I'll sit back and I will let them go off. And then I'll start to talk. They usually interrupt me because they're not done. And I shut up again. And then I usually start off with, I'm really sorry about that. From your perspective, I can see that. Let me show you my perspective and why I kind of disagree. And I feel like you're a little off because I think you're only looking at it from your perspective. And I just try and reason with them and be nice to them. And, usually once they yell and get it off their chest, they're usually kind of a little, but again, you can't please everyone all the time. So you're going to have that happen, just expect it, but just kind of let them get it off their chest and hope you can talk them out of it.
How do you tell yourself that it's okay? Because, I'm a people pleaser, especially with clients. I'm like, I want to make sure that they get that result, and I go all my way. And it was just like, there was just no way that we were going to get this. We were going to be able to get what we wanted. But it was like,
that's the reason you're a lawyer. For me, what I do, and I try to be true to this during my whole career, is I want to do something I care about day in and day out. And it's led me to where I am now. And there's no way not to be emotionally invested when you're dealing with couples who are trying to adopt a child. And I just think it's going to hurt sometimes because you actually do care. So I'm sorry to give you that horrible answer, but it actually means that that you're doing the right thing for your clients.
I actually concur. I think the minute you stop caring what people think and how your clients, I think then you punch you out of station because your drive will go at that point. So there's nothing you can do. I think Ryan said it earlier, is perfect in the sense that, you know, it's probably something else they're more upset with. It's the result, it's not you personally, and it is hard not to take it personally, but I think if you don't care, if you weren't to get affected and you said, sorry, and slammed your door, I think you find that you probably just aren't in the right area. You know, there's something else.
You know, in a lawsuit, there's a V, A versus B, right? 50% of the people are going to lose. Right? 50%, there's two sides. Someone's losing, right? That's why I always say the best settlement is when everyone's pissed off, right? Because, so the reality is you know, and I totally concur that, it just shows that you really have a good heart to be a good lawyer because it will bother you to lose. But it doesn't bother you to lose. Sometimes it's your pride because you're competitive. Sometimes it just breaks your heart because you care about that person, right? So, but expect to lose. I mean, the only person who's never lost a trial is the one who's either never tried it or they've only tried one.
Any other questions?
Starting a new firm, cash flow is obviously an issue, and in the day and age of everything's a subscription, you have to pay these monthly fees for like client management software, if you want. It's kind of a necessity, but is there any tools out there or that would be something like case or client management software that is a standalone system that you'd be able to purchase without worrying about adding a fixed overhead to yourself? That you guys come up with. That's one thing that we're going to do. Because everything's, you know, if you're paying for Westlaw, rather than come here to the law library, things like that, for research and whatnot, adding things like client management is an additional overhead that cash flow becomes an issue with these things. So, especially if you're working on a contingency basis.
Brian, could you mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you use the term client management software, what is your goal and what are you looking to accomplish?
Well, being able to check out for conflict of interest issues because I have a private, like for example, my primary practice is personal injury, but starting out, there are other areas that I have to be, I step into to be able to have that money and be able to pay some of my payment. And so I will, obviously I'm starting out and I don't know really where my practice may end up taking me, I really may in a different direction. And so things like checking conflict of interest, being able to, a lot of the tools that Lexis, you know, Lexis software brings in, or Thomas & Reuters stuff, those are all great tools. But the problem is it's a small firm, and they almost, I feel like they become a necessity. So being able to maintain client information for marketing purposes, for being able to build that, as well as correspondence, you know, saving documents and things like that. So I just say, no, there's something out there like that.
For the first time in 26 years, I bought software for this. When I started, I would retain the client, I would kind of put their names in, it's the database, but it wasn't a marketing software. I would note 2 weeks before any statute, 6-month government claim, 2 weeks before on my calendar. I wouldn't do the day of because I didn't want to get to the other, holy cow, I missed it. 2 weeks before. There's ways around it. In the PI world, they are super expensive. I mean, they're ridiculous what they charge. And we're contingency. You know, I mean, for these guys, it makes perfect sense. For us, it's contingency, right? So your biggest fear is conflict of interest, and I agree with that. But the chances of you really having a conflict of that, once it comes up, the State Bar will allow you to say, okay, it came up and I have to withdraw. And that has happened to me 5 times in 26 years. But you have to withdraw, and sometimes that sucks. Like, well, this is a good case. This is a good case, I don't want to withdraw. You got to withdraw. Don't let your ethics get the problem.
I would just make this observation. I think a lot of this stuff is oversold. That's just my opinion. And this goes back from way back when they started the firm, and they're like, who's your IT guy? And this is why I went to a Mac office back in the 90s, rather than PC, when everybody's saying the Mac is dead. It's because I don't want to hire an IT guy. I was the IT. I set up the whole network in the office, and they kind of be aware about this. not that difficult. Realistically, this is what I was saying. What is it you're looking for? What is a conflict check? It's going through your database and saying, who have you represented in the past? Isn't that the same thing as literally what's in your Rolodex? And all this conflict checker is nothing but a highfalutin Rolodex? Okay. So with your software that probably came with Office or anything else, you have a contact management program. You got an Apple, you got something called Contacts. It's there. But what you have is a lot of people, that's what I used to talk to a lot of new attorneys saying, really, you want to go spend how much on yellow page ads? Because now you're looking to pay for the ad. You as a new young attorney starting off with practice, now you're working to pay for software. Can I go back to just the real basics? What is it you're looking for and why? And there's another way to accomplish it without paying for some high-end bells and whistles. And you probably find that it's there, and it may even be there in terms of freedom.
I agree. I think you can get cafeteria plans as well, where you can choose what you need. I need a strong billing software. So that's important for me. But I don't pay, and I also need calendar management. There's a lot of things that I don't use that I can use, to do spreadsheets or things like that where I don't have to use that. So I would look at different billing programs or whatever software you're looking at and see if there's a cafeteria plan. But you may not always need those things if you're going to go there.
Any other questions?
Actually, yes.
Yes.
So I do a lot of legal blogging. And every now and then I see, this goes to the marketing issue. I don't know, one of you had mentioned that you have a huge website. Websites are like the virtual building. Do any of you engage or encourage anybody in your staff to blog, thereby showing more intellect online? I mean, you're smart enough.
I'm the one who has the website, right? And I know that to get to the top of the Google, you need to blog, you needed this, you needed that. I think lawyers are going too far, personally. I can't tell you the amount of times that there's law firms that will steal a newspaper article, put it online like it's a newspaper article, and then at the end say, the law offices of so-and-so handle cases just like this. And to me, that's just totally unethical, right?
Yeah.
That's not blogging, though. That's like an advertisement and so when you Google car crash, Palm Springs, death of a 5-year-old, all of a sudden it comes up like it's a newspaper ad, and then they advertise it at the bottom. That's what I'm talking about when I say that the internet's going crazy, and I think we as a profession really have to get a hone on that. I will warn you about blogging. Okay, I'm going to give you a personal example where it truly, I'm on camera, bit me in the ass. Okay?
Backfire.
I don't think kids are going to see
No, okay,
that.
this is big, actually, right? So I'm at an event in Laverne. I'm on the board of visitors over there, and it's the day of the San Bernardino shootings. And my blogger comes up to me and says, I want to blog something. I said, look, today is a day about the San Bernardino shootings. And I've been in the Inland Empire since 1992. And my heart is to tell people that it breaks for them. You put that on a Facebook page, right? I go to a meeting and my phone blows up from my friend. What the heck is going on? What are you saying? I said, I have no idea, right? I call my IT guy, I say, I don't care what you posted, you take it down, and you take it down right now, because somehow it's not what I said. And it started out great, typical bloggers, and this is a friend of mine, right? This is a guy that I hired that I know really well, and I know his heart. But he can't help himself, right? Still. So he goes off and he blogs about, as a member of San Bernardino, and I wrote the first 2 paragraphs, and I said, just kind of do something like this. First 2 paragraphs, as a member of San Bernardino community, the Inland Empire, we gotta, this breaks my heart. Having been someone who's tried to protect this community for 20 some odd years, well, the very end is like, if you like our Facebook page, right? And then, unfortunately after that, something posted in like top 10 verdict in the United States, right underneath that. And to be honest with you, it broke my heart that people thought that I would try and market it. And I was talking to some friends of mine, because I told you guys earlier, right, there's a little mistrust in me because I wasn't involved in the community. I was Yellow Page, I was internet, and I'm talking to my friends and I'm crying on the phone because it broke my heart, right? So, do I believe in blogging? Yes. Does anything go out of my office without me seeing it? Never again, ever. Because a guy whose heart I knew, who I thought was in line with me, couldn't help but say, and I know that the tag was a mistake, but like my Facebook page, was his words. Right? And I had to be, do I fire really one of my best friends? And I literally was this close, guys, to have to fire one of my very best friends. And I said, for 1 year we go on a marketing hiatus. For the next 6 months, every ad in the Inland Empire will be donate to the Red Cross for the San Bernardino Massacre. Because I don't want to think about advertising. So, in answer to your question, yes, blogging is important. It gets you up to the front of the Google, and there's a whole element to that. Be very careful with what you blog. I'm still not sure my reputation is recovered, and I know that I will start to cry if I talk too much about it still. That's how much it bothers me.
I have to second that because I think, yes, it's helpful when you're doing SEO. You have a second purpose for it that's also useful for people. In my industry, attorneys will sometimes blog about various issues that come up in adoptions. How you prepare to adopt a biracial child, or a same-sex couple adopting a female. What issues might they have? And things that actually matter to the people that are looking at my website. So I haven't done it yet, but I think once you have a certain amount of experience in your industry, and there's things that you have to tell people in general when they care, that that should be the primary focus of the reason you blog. And then there's the added benefit of it helping your business be marketing.
Any other questions?
It's specific. With regard to either building software or client management software, if you're choosing to do it online because that's what's most cost efficient to you, what are your thoughts as far as these online entities that store your client data overseas?
There's actually a really good article from the Los Angeles Bar Association on that. It also goes to electronic, you store your files, because all of us have different requirements based on what area of law you practice. I can actually get that. I can't remember, I read it, I've actually printed it out. But it talks about, the cloud programs, and if you're going to use clouding to store files or store information, you have to have all the legal protections. I said legal, but you have to have all the protections you can get. And it's obviously all confidential information. We deal in that, we know that all very well. So the article kind of lends itself to talking about what are, better security, parameters to have versus not, and the programs that are good. And actually, I believe CalBar does actually have on their website ones that are bar approved essentially, because that's the way we're all going. Our courts are all in this now. I mean, there's nothing. You try to get a judge to look at a file, he's looking at you like you're crazy because all he can see was on his screen at this point. And although we're very document heavy, most people are not, on that side of it. So it's on. I'm sure if you Google laptop, it's on that website. But I believe CalBar also has it. I at one point was researching it only because I was having boxes. They talk about bankers boxes, filling up my office and my storage unit. I was having to get a bigger storage unit to carry all my files, and I wanted to know about electronically storing, and that was kind of a crossover.
And if you signed in with your email, I can email blast a link.
Yeah, I will try to get it.
All of you under BCC cover, if you'd like. Any other questions?
The informational book, little pamphlet that we handed out didn't have all of the panelists' emails. If they're willing to share that, maybe you can jot it down in case there are further questions.
I think mine was provided.
Yes, I'll be providing them
I
again.
don't know what mine was, it's pretty easy, it's G Rizio, 1Z, Rizio, @RizioLawFirm.com.
Yeah, mine's really easy. B. Pearcy at B. Pearcy Law. First initial, last name, first initial, last name, law.
Mine's jgerardoffice@gmail.
And another resource you can use is everybody's registered with the California State Bar, so you can find them at the attorney directory with a full listing of their contact information. Anybody else have questions, or you all want to just break for social time? We have another 5-10 minutes of this space, so please feel free to enjoy yourself. Thank you all so much.